What's up, everybody? I'm Taylor, and this is my personal recovery journey. Here I share how I've been able to stay sober and everything I've learned on my healing journey. I provide free resources, suggestions, tips, information by just sharing my experience, strength, and hope. I want to share something because it's on my heart to share this part of my journey. And I've made, if you're a subscriber and you've seen, prior videos to this, I made a video a while back speaking about my psychiatric medication journey and how I made it through that. I'll briefly describe that if you're new watching this and you don't have any prior background information to what I'm talking about, to help you understand what this video is going to be about. So when I first became sober, very, very long time ago, maybe like 10 years ago, let's say, I had moved states, and I thought that moving states was going to be enough to keep me sober. It wasn't. So I got sober, and I realized that I was having some serious mental health problems, and I mean some serious, like abnormal anxiety, like paranoia. I wouldn't leave my house. I didn't have a support system at the time, so I was isolated. I was with my spouse. Then the depression sunk in, and like all these different types of me not being able to regulate my emotions, mood disorder, like my symptoms were just everywhere, okay? And so what did I do? I did what I'm taught. You're having problems with your mental health, you reach out, you go to counseling, and you go to a psychiatrist, and they'll be able to help me. So that's what I did. And I went to like 3 different psychiatrists within a maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5, maybe 6 year span. And all of them had a different diagnosis, but the same diagnosis that they all did have together was depression, anxiety, PTSD. And I've been diagnosed with ADHD as a kid. I wouldn't say a kid, like a teenager. But the thing is that I was trying this medication, trying that medication, and I would get brief moments of relief, and then the symptoms would come back, okay? And I realized at some point in my life, because it got to a point where I was on like 6 or 7 high milligram psych meds, and I was depressed. I was sleeping all day, every day. If I wasn't sleeping, I was imagining I was in a Netflix show, getting lost in the reality of Netflix, to anything to escape my head, okay? And I had got sober in 2020. So when I first got sober, that's when the psychiatric journey started, and I kept relapsing every now and then. And then 2020-ish is when I completely got sober. And so when I got sober, I threw myself into college as a coping mechanism. I was a stay-at-home mom. My kid was probably, 2-3 years old maybe, and I was doing online college, and I really dove deep into that. And I burnt myself out. And so the depression started sinking in. And a person can only last for so long, masking their pain from their past and acting like everything's okay. I took care of my house, I took care of my kid, took care of my husband, and I wasn't taking care of myself. And eventually, with doing that for years, a person just burns out, on top of having no support system. I was isolated. I didn't really interact with my family that much. I didn't have a connection with my family, so I was isolated. I was alone. And for years, probably about 2 years, I stayed in the most depressive state I have ever been in sober, okay? And I tell the back information so people can understand what I'm about to talk about next, which is very important, and it's been very important for me to come to this realization. When I was getting misdiagnosed with all these things, like I've been misdiagnosed with BPD, with bipolar, with the mood disorder, right? And all these things, not one psychiatrist told me that these mental health diagnoses could be because of the type of childhood I had, because of trauma, because of dysfunction. They were so quick to prescribe me a medication. Not one of them told me that I needed to add healing on top of taking the medication. Now, I've been in recovery for almost 3 years now, and I have done a lot of research. I don't have degrees or anything, but I have done enough research to earn a degree. And I had to delve deep into learning about mental health on the brain, trauma on the brain, addiction on the brain, dysfunction, abuse, like everything I could research to understand my brain and who I had become, I would learn about it. And I learned about, a psychiatrist isn't supposed to diagnose you until you've got at least 2 to 3 years clean, okay? And I didn't know that. So it doesn't matter, at least it didn't matter for me. Like I said, I was sober in 2020 and I burnt myself out with college. I was sober, but I was depressed. I wasn't working on myself. I wasn't addressing the trauma, the dysfunction, the resentment I had towards myself, the guilt, the shame. I wasn't working on myself. And I came into 12-step programs 3 years ago because something in me clicked, like a light switch turned on and off. And I realized that if I don't get up and take action, I'm going to die. I was physically sick, I guess, from all the medicine, from sleeping all day, every day. Like, my body was shutting down. I was like 215 pounds, full of fluid. I was miserable. And the little voice that's in my head, like that intuitive voice, some people will call it God, higher power, higher self, our soul, whatever your choice of vocabulary is for you to describe, when something's about to happen, that little voice that whispers, hey, don't do that. Hey, that's a bad idea. That little voice is what I'm talking about. I call it the voice, or my intuition. It had told me, and it kept telling me for months, go back to AA, go back to AA. And I would brush it off and I would tell myself, that's not going to work. It's never worked for me before. Why would it work now? And eventually the voice got louder and louder and louder. Now, let me remind you, I'm on like 7 different psych meds at this time. I was emotionally, spiritually, and physically blocked from myself, people, and the power of life, okay? So for this intuition to be able to come back to me just was mind-blowing to me to begin with. And I realized I need to listen to this voice. Like, something in my heart told me I need to listen to this. And that's when I got back in 12-step programs. I threw myself into healing. I threw myself into researching again everything I needed to do to make myself be able to understand my brain and to heal the parts of me that were broken, right? I decided to come off all of my psych meds because I had brought it to my psychiatrist. I was telling her how physically sick I was, and she kept trying to add more medicine, okay? And I'm not even kidding. So I eventually took it in my own hands, and I realized that I am the only person that can help myself, because I knew deep in my heart that that's what I needed to do. When I came off my medication, I didn't say this is all or nothing thing. Okay, I had to really check my motives for being on my medication, and my motives were the fact that I was using my meds as a coping mechanism to numb out from pain in a legal way, and that's the truth, okay? Not one psychiatrist wanted to mention to me the withdrawals that could happen with coming off of these medications. The withdrawals were beyond painful, emotionally, physically, that I have ever been through my entire life, even with getting sober. Getting sober is nothing compared to months and months I spent detoxing from psychiatric medications. So with me telling you the back information to this is the main point of the video. I realized a long time ago that all mental health disorders are a set of characteristics to explain a person's personality, okay? These characteristics that I had, the BPD, the bipolar, the mood disorder, was stemmed from the guilt, the shame, the resentment, me not being able to regulate my emotions in a healthy way, me not being able to process my emotions, me not knowing how to show love and compassion to myself and to others. I was full of anger, full of rage. I didn't know how to channel that. I didn't know how to process that. So I had like 15 years of trauma, dysfunction, resentment, shame, guilt sitting inside of me that was unaddressed. Who wouldn't express symptoms of BPD, of bipolar, of a mood disorder? Pain, unaddressed pain can cause a person to act in ways that they wouldn't act if they were healed. And my point to this is, when I started healing myself and taking my healing journey a lot more seriously, and I started healing the parts of me that were broken, the symptoms of BPD dissipated, bipolar dissipated, I didn't have a mood disorder anymore. When I learned how to regulate my emotions and face pain and deal with pain without having to turn to a chemical substance, that was my problem. All the skills that I needed to successfully be a standard human being, I like to say standard, which when I say standard, what my brain is translated to is like regulating my emotions, communicating in a healthy way, showing love and compassion, trusting myself, loving myself, and emotionally and spiritually connecting to myself. When I started doing all these things, and I really started developing a spiritual and emotional connection to myself, and I learned how to forgive myself, all the things that I was misdiagnosed with were no longer a diagnosis. And I have been to the psychiatrist, and I have been re-diagnosed or whatever, and I do have PTSD, and I do have anxiety. And the reason is because a person that has lived the life that I have lived, that has been through the trauma that I have been through, there's no way someone just comes out of that without their nervous system being in flight or fight, okay? There's just no way. And I see all these videos online, if you just do this, if you do this, if you take this course, if you do that, and people will try to sell healing. And I understand the economy's bad, and trust me, I get it. But personally, I would never make somebody pay to want to heal, okay? And that's just my personal opinion, and that's what I feel very strongly about. And so my point in making this video is to let people know, if you've been diagnosed with any mental health disorder, drop the labels. Don't allow yourself to get stuck in this disorder, okay? Allow yourself to look at these mental health disorders as a set of characteristics that are your personality. These characteristics have been made up due to your environment, your upbringing, your trauma, your dysfunction, your resentment, your pain, whatever issues you have. Unaddressed pain is mental health disorders. And I'm talking about anxiety, PTSD, like I said, depression, especially depression. I was depressed for 2 years, and the only way I was able to come out of my depression was to get up and take action and force myself to take action when my brain didn't want to. That has been the only way I have been able to come out of my depression. And I tell you now, when I came into 12-step programs, it took me about 6 months, 7 months maybe, of having to fight a war in my head. Like that, I'm not a religious person, but that analogy of the devil and the angel, you got the devil on one shoulder and you have the angel on the other. That devil was whispering so loud because that was the only thing I had ever fed. So the more I fed the angel, the more I could hear it, the more I could feel it, the more I wanted it. The brain doesn't like change. And even though we all know that change is good for us, we all know that we want to be a better version of ourselves, we want to heal, right? That doesn't mean our brain agrees with us. Our brain is meant for survival. It's not meant to comfort us. It's not meant to support us. It's meant to keep us alive. So when anything is switched up, routines, and you're trying to learn a new habit, you're trying to learn new coping mechanisms, your brain will fight against you. That is a scientific fact. And when I learned about this, it made me realize that I might not have control of what my brain says, but I do have control over the action I take. And I do have a choice if I choose to listen to what that part of my brain is telling me. So the only way for me to get out of my depression wasn't medication. It was taking action, building new habits, building a routine, building a solid support system, being involved in my 12-step community, learning to forgive myself, trust myself, and show up for myself emotionally and spiritually. To let go of the shame, to let go of the resentments I had towards myself and towards others. And when I started healing and I started working on myself, the things that I had been diagnosed with had dissipated, okay? And I don't know who this video is going to help, but it was on my heart to make it. And when it's on my heart to make a video, I make it, because how selfish would I be if I didn't share what I have learned? How selfish would I be if I allowed fear to stop me from speaking my personal experience, strength, and hope, you know? And another thing I want to add is that I'll be honest about this, and I'm going to show some humility here and be vulnerable. I used to think that mental health was just in the mind. I didn't realize that it could actually be a physical thing until my body started going into flight or fight, like physically flight or fight for no reason. My brain thought it was a reason, but logically it was not a reason. And the more that I tried not to take medicine, I tried everything I could to heal my nervous system and do everything I could do, and nothing worked. The only thing that worked was my perspective towards when my body went into flight or fight. My mind was calm, okay, but my body was still physically going into flight or fight. And so it also really upsets me when I see people on social media trying to say, if you just do this, if you do that, your body won't do this anymore, and blah, blah, blah. All the stuff that you probably already know what I'm talking about. It's like, hold up, wait a second. Have you really been through trauma? Did you grow up in a critical, judgmental, hostile environment around people who were dysfunctional and in active addiction your entire life? You know, it's like our brains remember the things that we can't remember. So our body's responding to something that happened in the past or was similar in the past. And we have no control over if our body physically reacts and goes into flight or fight. It's trying to protect us. And so I did surrender, and it's hard for me to say this because I worked so hard to come off all my medications. I really did. For almost 2 years I tried. But with a person's body going into flight or fight like 20 times a day, and I'm not being dramatic, for almost 2 years, a person can only take so much. So I did. I started something to help my body stop going into flight or fight. And the relief that I got is just beyond, it's beyond satisfying, and I'm very grateful. But I had to check my motives first. Why am I going to take this medicine? And that's the whole purpose, is that I had to be willing to check my motives and get real honest with myself, to ask myself, why do I continue to pop these medicines even though they're prescribed? And so this has been my personal experience. Like I said, I don't know who this video is going to help, but it was on my heart to make it. Whatever you're going through, it may seem like you can't make it out, that you're always going to be where you're at, but I promise you, the only way to not stay stuck is to get up and take action repetitively, and to form new coping mechanisms, to form new habits, and find good people. Good people. I speak a lot about 12-step programs, but there's so many different other recovery programs out there. It's not just 12 steps, you know. And something that I've noticed, because I've done a lot of different types of recovery, recovery programs, and I all notice one common theme amongst them all, is that we're just trying to heal from our past. We're trying to find a spiritual and emotional connection to ourselves, and we're trying to learn how to love ourselves. And that's what all these programs are about. They may describe processes differently and use different vocabulary words and speak different vocabulary in meetings and things like that, but they're all singing the same song. Okay, lately I've been doing refuge recovery meetings. It's based on the Buddhist principles, and I never realized anything about Buddhism. Honestly, I thought Buddhism was a religion, but I found out it's really not. It's just classified as religion. And I dabbled into it to understand it just a little bit. And you know, when I go to a refuge recovery meeting, they meditate for the first 25 minutes. And they bring the solution. They share experience, strength, and hope. They share what they're doing and what they're working on and what steps they're taking to get to where they're at and to stay where they're at. So a lot of bringing the solution. But keep in mind, all meetings are made up of people. So it's not necessarily the program that's the problem. It could be the types of people that are in that meeting. It's not the program that's the problem. It's the person who's willing to work the program. And I had to realize that with having 10 years in and out of Alcoholics Anonymous, I would always blame the program for not working for me, but it was really me not willing to work my program. And I had to tweak a lot of vocabulary words in 12-step meetings, and I had to do whatever it took because I was willing to go to any lengths to heal myself from my brokenness and to become who I am today. And recovery is a lifelong process, but I'll say this: suffering and healing are both lifelong processes. And the more I gravitated towards healing, the easier it became. I never think about picking up anymore, and I haven't for a very long time. That mental obsession has been lifted. And I can't sit here and say, oh, it's because I have a connection with the higher power, or it's because of this, it's because of that. I believe it's because I've put in the work to get to where I'm at. I've healed parts of me. I've reached within myself, and I have pulled all the things that I can think of that I have buried my entire life. I pulled them up to the surface, and I had people who could guide me and show me how to overcome them and heal from them. And the only way I've been able to heal is to feel my emotions without judgment, without criticism, and without beating myself up and calling myself a piece of shit. So this is my personal experience, and I just want to encourage everybody: be your own teacher, be your own advocate. Don't rely on other people 100%. Learn to show up for yourself. Learn to believe in yourself, because you are all you have. I learned a long time ago, I came in this world by myself, and I'm going to die by myself. Why do I continue to fight against myself? Because here I sit, right here, looking straight at myself. So I can learn to love myself, or I can just hate myself and be miserable the rest of my life. There's only really two options in life: get up, take action, or stay stuck. So if you could connect to this video or relate to this video in any way, you can take anything that you've learned from this and apply it to any area of your life. I'm very grateful to be of service. You have the same power that I have found within myself, within you. Start believing in yourself.